The ethereal plane is more than just a misty void. It is an incredibly massive and complex network of zones and realms. Some house mighty and ancient civilizations, others are slowly decaying remnants of what once was. And many are violent, horrific battlefields where Xill and Phase Spiders fight a silent war for territorial dominance. By exploiting trans-dimensional fractures, these horrors and others like them have perfected the art of the multiplanar ambush. Today, we're analysing the ecology of the multiverse's most efficient predators, where they dwell, what they do in the ethereal realms, and the deep cosmic cause for their existence within the Dungeons & Dragons universe. Anyone who's played Baldur's Gate 3 or been playing the tabletop role-playing game for a while knows a bit about Phase Spiders. Not nearly enough people know about the Xill. After this video, you won't think about one without the other ever again. This relationship on the surface is just a reflection of the real-world relationship between spiders and parasitic wasps like the mason bee. But in Dungeons & Dragons lore, it goes into the very limits of cosmic fantasy and very, very horrific places. So settle back, grab yourself a tasty beverage. We're about to get deeply nerdy. As we know, phase spiders are basically giant spiders with a blue and spooky appearance that dwell in the ethereal plane and can, as their name says, phase into the material plane and grab their prey. But you have to wonder, how the hell did these things evolve to do this? Were they the product of some sort of insane experiment? How come such lethal predators are not simply everywhere, picking off whatever creature they choose? What could be preventing them from multiplying out of control and turning reality into a total nightmare? Well, that's where the Xill enter the picture. For more information on the phase spider and the Xill, I do have some older videos on the channel specifically covering their lore. Links to those videos are down in the video description. Like most of my videos, the information there is just as relevant now as it was back then, but my audio recording has gotten a lot better. Granted, this video is not a remastering of that information. We're going much deeper than that and pulling information from a wide array of sources across all Dungeons & Dragons lore, including Pathfinder, because it improves and expands our understanding of the D&D cosmos. I don't really care what company published it. I serve up the lore for the greater good, and I'm here to inspire and entertain you. It's not up to me to dictate how you use the information. If it gets you excited for your next campaign or makes you want to roll some dice with your friends, then I have succeeded in my mission. Simple as that. The most recent and up-to-date official lore for the Xill comes from Mordenkainen's Fiendish Folio Volume 1. I'll quote the text there exactly as written, and then we can expand on some of the unanswered questions by drawing on older lore and the expanded lore from Pathfinder, along with some insights on the greater cosmology of the planes from my own many years of research, particularly in regards to the nature of the Abyss and the forces of entropy in the D&D multiverse. And I quote, "Deep within the ethereal plane are the demi-planes, miniature worlds built by powerful archmages or other mighty entities to serve as private domain. Each demi-plane is a designated realm built for a specific purpose. Some are fortresses designed to keep wanderers from the material world away. Others are far more sinister, dark realms where evil dreams take root and become ghastly realities. Such as the realm that spawned the Xill, horrific insectoid creatures created long ago to serve an ancient evil master. Xills are horrid four-armed creatures that seem to be a cross between a lizard and an insect. They emerge from the ethereal plane to fall upon their victims with their vicious claws, but their aim is not to kill. Instead, a Xill injects its victims with a paralytic poison. When their poison overwhelms their target, the Xill snatches the victim and returns to the ethereal. The ultimate fate of unfortunates carried off in this manner is not known, but plenty of speculation surrounds the Xill's true nature and the demi-plane that spawned them. A variety of theories attempt to explain the Xills and their origin. The one found most plausible by scholars of the planes concerns the enigmatic wizard Caraptus. Supposedly, Caraptus long ago crafted a demi-plane to serve as personal domain from which he could dispatch his servitors to collect the powerful artifacts he longed to stockpile. The Xills were his creation, servitors who could slip to and from the ethereal plane and steal any artifact or kidnap any person he wished to collect. Little has been heard from Caraptus, save for the recent theft of 3 mighty items in the world of Greyhawk. He has remained primarily a figure of myth, rumour and legend. As an inveterate collector of magic items, though, his demiplane is likely filled with powerful artifacts long thought to be lost to the multiverse. If the story is true, his demiplane is undoubtedly guarded by strange traps and logic-defying puzzles, along with a legion of brainwashed servitors and countless Xills. As to the fate of the individuals seized by the Xills, they perhaps form the bulk of Caraptus' followers, brainwashed by his magic and set to guard his many dungeons. These fanatics are among the most dangerous followers. It is telling that the Xills rarely kidnap commoners. Instead, they target young but promising adventurers, those whose natural talent and aptitude point to a bright future, but whose skills have not yet grown sharp enough to repel a dedicated assault. End quote. First off, a fundamental fact about D&D cosmology that many overlook in the specific details is that entropy is different in D&D. From immortal beings to indestructible magic artifacts to the very existence of the undead, the laws of death, decay, and such are fundamentally different. Another thing that forms the bedrock of D&D cosmology is that the natural order and laws of reality have been disrupted by what planar scholars call a malignancy. This goes much deeper than just the existence of demons and the abyss. The very existence of mentally morphic effects, magic transmutation, even gods in the outer conceptual planes is all tied into this basic fact. In Dungeons & Dragons, thought and belief can manifest and alter the physical laws of reality as we know them. A malignancy is a tear in the planes that allows one plane to slowly destroy the other. Creatures spontaneously transform into the invading plane's counterpart. The terrain and atmosphere changes and shifts, and so on. A malignancy is more than just an open and uncontrolled portal. It is an attack on the very fabric of a plane's existence. When demons pour into the location on the material plane, this is exactly what they are trying to create. The very presence of them causes this effect. Their appetite for total chaos and destruction accelerates it, and they feed on its energy to perpetuate their own. When the disruption is so severe that reality starts to tear apart, the abyss itself latches on to the largest chunk of broken reality and swallows it, more or less. It becomes another layer of the abyss, and its gradual destruction is the abyss feeding on it. The demons are like its digestive acids, tearing it apart and infecting its matter bit by bit. But not all fragments are consumed by the abyss. They are still violently detached from the material plane, but they have nowhere else to go. They're not anchored to the great wheel, the flow of magic and so on, so they are cast adrift into the ethereal plane. There, the violent disruption and slowed corruption of their reality is slower, sicker, less violent and more insidious. It is the domain of decay, disease, infection, rot, and parasites. You want to know where the monstrous planet insect and arachnid predators come from? Look no further than those noxious, fragmented nightmare realms for your answer. The teeming bogs, the midnight realms of hopeless rot, and the forms of life that feed on rot and each other. This is where Caraptus most likely found his Xills. Think about it. They are a parasite species evolved from whatever mutated predators have managed to survive. But they are doomed. No other energy is left. They will feed on their fragmented chunk of reality and each other until there's nothing left but an echo of nightmares in the void. What strategy for survival could there be except escape by any means they can? Then along comes a phase spider, native to some other fragment long ago. They visit these places just as they hunt the borders of many worlds. Sooner or later, one of them is going to encounter a Xill, and that Xill will not kill it. Oh no. It infected that great spider with its eggs and let that spider go. The spider fled to some other fragment or demiplane or world, and the Xill's offspring hatched and ate it from the inside out, bursting forth. They were free, and they were a dire threat to every other life form they encountered. But more of interest to you, my friend. They were instinctually drawn to creatures that were capable of travelling between different realms of existence. Adventuring player characters are very high on that list. The Xill and the Phase Spiders have been natural enemies for eons. They target the same sort of prey. They hunt each other. But never was or could there be peace between them. Where you find Phase Spiders, you are much more likely to run into the Xill. But there is much more to the Xill, and we need to delve into the deeper lore of the planes to find it. Let's go over some literary history, and you can see where I'm getting this information, since I know a few of you really like to confirm the details in the sources. The Xill has evolved noticeably across editions. While retaining its core identity as a four-armed, flame-red reptilian insectoid planar predator native to the ethereal plane that ambushes prey, they serve to serve its parasitic and reproductive needs. In its 1981 debut in the first edition Fiend Folio, the creature appeared as a relatively basic ethereal ambush predator with magic resistance that are temporarily lost during plane shifting, emphasizing hit-and-run tactics and a simple drive to implant eggs in living hosts without elaborate societal details. The second edition refined and greatly expanded the Xill through the 1992 Monstrous Compendium Fiend Folio Appendix and especially the 1998 Planescape Monstrous Compendium Appendix 3. I got a lot of information from there, where it gained rich lore distinguishing barbaric lower clans who raided naked and weaponless purely for reproduction, from far more civilized high clans that would build ether cities, wear clothing and jewelry, manufacture goods, trade with outsiders, and keep slaves as incubators. Telepathy became a feature in some descriptions, and the reproductive cycle received clearer explanation. Each will lay eggs only twice in its roughly 50-year lifespan, implanting them into paralyzed living hosts whose bodies the larvae consumes from within. Each egg contains up to 8 larvae. Third edition, presented in the 2000 Monster Manual and revised in the 2003 3.5 Monster Manual, standardized the Xill as a core outsider with a challenge rating of around 6. Spell resistance instead of magic resistance, improved grab and implant mechanics using its forearms, and a noted divide between the savage and more civilized individuals. The level adjustment of +4, which I think is still lower than that of a troll off the top of my head, made it playable as a character race option in some campaigns, while the emphasis remained on lawful evil militaristic tactics, plane-shifting ambushes, and a strong preference for phase spiders as ideal incubators, fueling an ongoing war on the ethereal plane. Paizo's Pathfinder First Edition is, as we know, drawn directly from the 3.5 edition framework, and in the 2009 Bestiary on page 283, we see the Xill kept the outsider type, full implant and plane walk details, and the Bestiary fluff text highlighted conflicts with phase spiders and night hags. For their own home-setting world building, Paizo added a chaotic green-scaled variant native to Galarian's Valashmai jungle and occasional matriarch variants in later supplements, preserving the asexual all-female society and parasitic ecology while integrating the creature more tightly into planar horror scenarios. Then Pathfinder 2nd Edition, appearing in the 2020 Bestiary 2 on page 299, this reimagining of the Xill as an aberration labelled an ethereal stalker with updated mechanics suited the new rule set. It retained the focus on marauding the material plane to kidnap victims back to the ethereal for reproduction, but it shifted away from the detailed high and low clan divide and focused more on streamlined combat abilities that emphasized mobility, paralysis, and group raids without the same depth of societal lore. So even Paizo dumbs the lore down on occasion. I'm not casting shade on Paizo here. In a number of ways, Paizo actually has more respect for the historic lore of D&D than Wizards of the Coast does, particularly over the last decade or so. Case in point, in 5th edition, the Xill received its only official treatment in the 2019 digital supplement Mordenkainen's Fiendish Folio Volume 1 on page 21, which I've read out, where it was reclassified as a monstrous rather than an outsider, a monstrosity rather than an outsider, and given a lower challenge rating of 3. The art shifted to a more xenomorph-like monstrous design with a sloping back, antennae, and exaggerated maw, while the lore tied the creatures more strongly to a hidden demiplane created by the Archwizard Caraptus. Abductions emphasized servitude and guard duty over explicit egg implantation, downplaying the classic parasitic reproduction in favor of brainwashing victims for labor, particularly targeting less experienced adventurers. Though the plane-shifting ambush style and four-armed combat remained recognizable, the core of what made the Xill actually horrific was pretty much censored by exclusion. The creature also gained the ability to speak Common, making interaction slightly more feasible than in earlier editions, but really not making much sense because, and I ask you, what the hell does Wizards of the Coast even think the Common tongue is? It's plastered so heavily into everything that it renders other languages all but useless, just like their changes to Dark Vision make it almost pointless carrying or worrying about light sources. Anyway, across all versions, the Xill consistently appears as a medium-sized, roughly 4 to 5 foot tall being, weighing a very lean 100 pounds, with 4 clawed arms, red scaly hide in most depictions, and a ruthless drive to expand through living hosts. There is so much more that can be done with the Xill, so I'm just going to riff on ways I think about including them in games and handling some tricky situations. If you have players who are killing and dissecting every monster they come across because they've been playing a lot of Monster Hunter, or are eating everything because they're obsessed with Delicious in Dungeon and want to find out if, in fact, everything does taste like chicken, throw a phase spider at them and fill that monster with Xill offspring. Treat them exactly like rot grubs when the player characters start to carve into the phase spider corpse, or hey, if they attack it with slashing damage, have some Xill grubs burst out of the thing in the middle of combat, and then they start shrieking with psychic pulses that echo across the border into the ethereal and summon a feral band of very angry mama Xills who leap literally out of nowhere and rip the shit out of everyone threatening their babies. Let's say 1 or 2 of the player characters get dragged into the ethereal and the players decide they don't really want to side quest to go rescue them somehow and just roll up some new characters. Well, later, you bring those abducted characters back as non-player characters, brainwashed and leveled up and really angry, twisted by the Xill into living revenants who seek revenge by dragging those who abandoned them to their fate into the ethereal and their own certain doom. If you have players who start summoning the undead willy-nilly, thinking there are no consequences for using them like cannon fodder, or elemental creatures, have the Xill start targeting them because of the disruption effects they are having in the ethereal or elemental planes. There are many bizarre creatures designed for exactly this sort of thing. The Thought Eaters, Disenchanters, Rust Monsters, Aurum Vorax, Land Shark, even the Manticore. It's ridiculously easy to get blown into the deep ethereal from the border ethereal, or the misty shore as it's known amongst planet travelers. The Xill or of the high clans can be encountered anywhere in the ethereal. They live in the deep ethereal on huge chunks of solid ether. It's extremely weird stuff, so let's delve into that for a moment. This information is primarily from the Planescape setting and detailed in 2nd edition's Guide to the Ethereal Plane. Solid ether is called protomatter or prima materia among planeswalkers and planar scholars. It is a rare, concentrated form of the ethereal mist that has compacted through fluctuations in the plane caused by ether cyclones, vortex fronts, the flexing of the curtain of vaporous colors, or by artificial stabilization. One of the civilizations of the ethereal realms, the Lamazu, can do this sort of ethereal terraforming, though little is known in the material realm about them. Oh, one interesting bit of history for the Forgotten Realms, excuse the sidetrack for a moment. Around minus 30,700 DR, during the rise of the Aerie empires in the Days of Thunder, a relatively small number of Lamazu decisively defeated a much larger force of Aerie Croker, one of the main branches of the Aerie and the ancestors of the modern Aarakocra. This event, sometimes called the Lamazu Massacre, resulted in the deaths of approximately 1,000 Aeri Croca. It was a significant but localized military setback for the avian creator race. In response to this and other skirmishes, the Aeri Croca began magical experiments on domesticated landworms. These experiments produced the first wyverns, which the Aeri then used as aerial weapons and mounts. This innovation allowed the Aeri Croca empire to expand rapidly for a time. Some scholars mistakenly believe this was the genesis of proto-dragon fire drakes, but it's not the case. The dragons were already on Toril at this point. It was a massive flight of dragons led by the dragon god Garrix's favourite named General Nagamat that damn near exterminated the entire Aeri civilization, leaving the planet open to the rise of the dragon and giant empires in what we call the Dawn Age. Right, where was I? Right, protomatter. Solid ether appears as white or bluish pearl-tinged material with a consistency as variable as plastic, so you can get fluffy polystyrene ether or really rock-hard ether. It doesn't burn, it's very chemically neutral, as it's not exactly real, so it's dangerous to mess with unless you know what you're doing. High clan Xills in particular build refined cities and communities directly on these large stable chunks of solid ether, treating these as land masses like chains of islands in an endless sea of mist and storms. They don't need to craft ships, they can just fly out across the gulfs between them as long as the way is calm, and they seldom need to transport a lot of goods they can't just tether to some strange ethereal creature they've captured and subdued. You can get really funky with the societies and practices of those incredibly isolated and secretive alien cultures. Other creatures and organizations such as the Etherfera Society have also established bases or way stops on these solid chunks. Most are not that large because significant accumulations of solid ether trigger spontaneous natural demiplane formation, crystallizing further when ripples or stresses affect their surface, like waves crashing over rocks and freezing compressed deposits in layers. It may seem like there is snow or ash falling in drifts across these isolated asteroids, but it's just more ether stuff, like puffs of cotton wool. So water and food are precious in the deep ethereal. It's like living in a nebula in space, so dense you can breathe the gas, warmed by some sort of invisible sun that's just diffuse light with seemingly no real direction or origin, no day or night, just endless nothing. It's a very spooky and alien environment where things can come out of the mist. Dead things, nasty things, hungry things, things that were so terrible they got thrown into an endless expanse of nothingness to be lost and forgotten forever. The High Clan Xills are intelligent, far more refined, some would even say civilized. They make goods, wear fine clothing, they trade and guide others in the deep realms from time to time. But they are still Xill. They still require living host bodies to incubate their offspring. And rather than constantly hunting for fresh victims, they have turned to farming them. Let that sink in for you. You no need to go into the gruesome details. Just know that if you deal with the Xill, they may seem a monstrous appearance race that is shockingly reasonable to work with. They might rescue a lost party of adventurers, offer to guide them to other locations, trade with them, sell information about other locations and beings in the ethereal, even instruct visitors in some aspects of spellcraft involving planar portals or dealing with the undead. But at some point, the player character should see the stark and horrific reality the stability and culture is built on. They will see other humanoids, mostly below the age of 15, little more than domesticated primates, clever pets and livestock, destined to be implanted with the Xill eggs, die horribly, and then be harvested for meat and their precious water. Never eat the fresh bacon in a Xill camp. That's my advice. And with that, I return you to your home plane. Thanks for joining me in another cosmic foray into the D&D multiverse. Special thanks to channel members, Fourthwall heroes and Substack members. Be sure to join the Discord server, link down below if you have not already. You will find me there every day, ready to and willing to answer any questions. My name is AJ Pickett, your sage of Candlekeep, and as always, thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more for you very soon.